Okay, let's bring in Brooks Laich. Brooks, thanks so much for doing this today. How you doing, man?
Sean, I'm great. One, I appreciate you and Tommy having me on. And two, I also appreciate how much support you've shown me in my hockey career. You're a huge hockey fan. You got a hockey photo up behind you. And so we used to connect over hockey, which was awesome. But I love now that we're connected over CrossFit. But I'm doing great, man. Life is awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We have a lot to talk about, and most of the stuff we're going to talk about has to do with the CrossFit space and the sport. But for people who don't know you, just want to get to know you a little bit here. When was it in your career that you knew that you were going to play professionally in the NHL?
Oh, well, great question. So when I was a kid, born and grown up in a small town in Saskatchewan up in Canada, hockey was life. Just everybody played hockey. It's just what we did. My hometown is 600 people. We have one rink, and that's about all there is to do in town. We have 7 months of winter a year. So we just grew up playing hockey. And I just loved the sport from the time I was born. And then when I was 13, I made the cognizant decision hockey is now a pursuit to play in the NHL. Growing up, every kid in Canada wants to play in the NHL. They say it, but then there has to be a real shift in mindset to like, okay, I'm now pursuing this full time. This is a life obsession to become an NHL player. And so at 13, I made that switch. I'd come home every day after school. I'd work out in my basement. I would lift. I would do plyometrics. I borrowed hurdles from the school, and I would do 300 hurdle hops a day in my backyard. And at 13, it was a real decision that every day I'm pursuing the NHL, and then just stuck with it until I was 34, until I was released by the LA Kings. But just absolutely blessed to play the sport I loved for that long.
And you talked about how that decision kind of manifested itself in terms of preparation and training. And I'm curious, the hurdle jumps and things like that are more sport specific for ice hockey. But what did the lifting and training regimen look like? Because it was done at a young age, and how did that kind of evolve a little bit as you were coming up?
When I was younger, I was a skinny kid. Like, man, if I didn't lift weights, I'd probably be 160 pounds. I'm 200 pounds now, but the framework of like my uncles who were genetically built the same they're pretty slight. So I just needed to add some strength. So it was just at the start, it was just basic. It was squatting and like some pressing, just very basic. But hockey we're legs and lungs. We are single leg explosive power, and we are lungs. So you spend a tremendous amount of time on plyometrics and agility. You develop your core, and then you're also running a ton, biking a ton. We need to be explosive, agile, fast, and do it for a long time. So we don't do a lot of upper body strength. There's not a tremendous amount of like bench press or shoulder press. You build shoulders a little bit to lean in and to receive contact. But other than that, upper body doesn't make a huge difference in the sport. It's a legs and lungs sport. So all of my time was spent on that, which is why when I found CrossFit, I'm like, oh my God, yes, I get to do some Olympic movements. I get to headstand, I get to do some gymnastics, some other things other than just single leg explosive bounding. But it was fun to train for. I love the sport specific training, but I also love now finding CrossFit and being out of just training one certain way.
You got to play for 4 different teams in the NHL. You had a really good career. I think you played more than 776 games. What are the things that stand out the most to you during your career, the memories that stand out the most?
Great question, Sean. I think more than like any single memories, I mean, I have some specific memories from scoring big goals in playoff games and like the building just erupting and the sound of 20,000 people. Like, I'll always remember the sound of the building. It's majestic. And it's something I miss now, the sound of 20,000 people cheering for you. But more than that, I cherished every moment of competing with and against the best in the world at the sport of hockey. That was the best for me. Like, I'm in the place where the best in the world are doing that, and I get to be part of it and measure myself in and against it. And you win and you lose and you learn, but that expression of my soul, the competition part of it, and that's what I've discovered since I've been out of hockey. I've been out of hockey over 3 years and I haven't touched the ice. I don't play hockey anymore. At some point, I hope I do. I hope it comes back into my life. but I realized that I loved and I was obsessed with the competition element that I found within the sport, because I could still do the sport, but there's not competition in it for me because it's not with and against the best in the world now, which is why I kind of find CrossFit now, because I'm like, oh, I can really compete in this. It's an expression of, I like physical, I like anything that's physical that's married with human interaction, right? That's sports. That was hockey. It's a physical activity married with human interaction. And I find that in CrossFit now.
And I've got one more little hockey question, because we're on the sports side of things. We just watched Matt Fraser retire, you know, the greatest individual athlete that the sport has ever seen. And I'm always curious about our fascination with the athlete in peak form, the kind of archetypal figure within a sport. And you've had the opportunity to play some, you've been able to watch the sport now and be a fan of CrossFit Games, while Fraser and Tia and Katrin and all these champions that have passed through in the last probably 5 to 6 years. And I'm curious, from your standpoint on the hockey side of things, who were the kind of 2 to 3 players that really stand out that you've been able to share the ice with and really stand out as like, man, that is someone, a maestro, if you will, that is just kind of painting their kind of Mona Lisa out there on the sporting field?
So Sean, you'll remember this, being the hockey fan you are. I got a chance to play against Mario Lemieux.
Yeah.
So I got a chance when I was 20 years old, my first like pro year, I got a chance to play against Mario Lemieux. And I grew up idolizing Mario Lemieux. He was my guy. I was just like, oh my God, this guy was amazing. And so I got a chance to play against him, and he's 6'4", 6'5", big reach. Like, he's everything you saw on TV. And they pounded us 8-1 that night. And Mario had 5 points. He had 2 goals, 3 assists, didn't break a sweat, and they just crushed us. And after the game, it sounds weird, but I was so excited after the game. I phoned my dad. I'm like, Dad, if I get to play against Mario again, I'm flying you here because you got to see this guy. Like, it was just a clinic. I was a young guy. It's like a young guy coming to the games at 20 and Fraser just serving him his lunch, right? That was, for me, that was a really cool memory to see some of my hockey heroes and get to play against them. That was so awesome. And then there's guys now, like the sport of hockey is just in such wonderful hands, with the McDavids and the Matthews and the McKinnons and these guys that are now the new generation of talent, right? We took skill and we stood on the shoulders of the guys before us and blew the roof off that. And these guys now, these young 20, 25-year-olds have taken it from us, stood on our shoulders, and just absolutely blown the roof off it on what humans are capable of doing, how fast you can move, how skilled you can be, and how fast you can process information at those speeds. Is just wonderful to watch. And you're seeing some of this in CrossFit now too. Like, I'm excited for the future of the sport in CrossFit, because you're seeing now new talents coming in that are at the age of 19, 20, 21, making things look so easy. And you're like, oh, wow, it's going to be awesome to watch this guy or this girl for the next 5, 7, 10 years in this sport and drive the sport forward.
And kind of touching on that, because I do think we're starting to see this next evolution in terms of what training for the sport to be an elite athlete looks like. And and kind of touching on what you just said about how hockey has evolved, I'm kind of curious to give your perspective on what did strength and conditioning and maybe like fitness look like on the hockey side of things when you first started compared to when you left, and maybe even now, where I feel like maybe pro athletes are taking a little bit more holistic approach to health and fitness.
So I remember when I was first breaking into the league, I had a veteran player saying to me, "Why are you lifting weights? I've never seen a dumbbell score a goal." And I was like, oh, this is like 2003, 2004. I'm like, wow. He's like, I was like, what do you do for training? He's like, I just run. And I'm like, oh my God, that was the last generation. And we stood on top of that. We were doing squats on med balls. I once squatted 365 pounds in my skates. Wow, I would squat with skates on. We would we would do all kinds of things. We would train in the sand, plyometrics with bands, jumps, parachutes, everything, you name it. We invented a lot of the wheel in training because we were kind of the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s was the first generation of hockey players that really blew the roof off ice, in off ice development. And now it's even gone further than that. Now kids are doing all that kind of stuff while having a coach put up 1, 2, green, red, blue, black, triangle, square, so that they're training their thought process of digesting information while they're doing these quick plyometrics while stick handling. Hockey players are even now training their eyes. How fast can we move our eyes and pick up objects and notice objects so that we can survey more information quicker? We need to be able to survey this information quicker. So it just continues to evolve. It's been fun to be part of evolving that and creating new things that we now see kids doing routinely. And then I'm always excited to see where kids and the athletes of today will take that.
How did you find CrossFit?
I think I was looking, it was 2014, and I think I was looking online just for some more training techniques. Like, I always wanted to evolve and get better. And then I stumbled upon this video of this guy who was so insanely mobile, so insanely powerful, so insanely strong. And his name was Rich Froning. And I was like, how does this guy,
too, yeah.
How is this guy this mobile and strong? I didn't know that like overhead stuff, just what I was watching this guy, the movement patterns of this athlete. And I was like, what is this? And I had never heard of CrossFit before that, had never really found it or stumbled upon it. And then I just started like watching this, and then found more athletes and these training modalities, and how these athletes were so strong, but so mobile, flexible, agile, fast still. Like, and I was like, wow, this is really building like almost, I don't know if there's ever such thing as a perfect athlete, but a super complete athlete, right? Like, as a hockey player, I have a lot of weaknesses as far as athletics. Like, I can't bench to save my life. My overhead pressing is terrible because I just never developed that. My leg strength and lungs are phenomenal, but I just never developed that. So I wanted to round myself out more, and that's how I found CrossFit, and then got addicted to it after that.
Mm-hmm. And I was kind of curious, maybe what was the thing that changed your mind specifically about GPP, or general physical preparedness? Because I feel like you go from a dumbbell never scored a goal to suddenly, hey, wait a second, we're building complete athletes. Maybe there's something here about this.
So when I moved to LA in 2015, I moved to LA in the off season. And I asked a friend of mine, I was like, where do the athletes train in town? And he said, go to Brick CrossFit. And I was like, okay, great. I went to a Gold's Gym, hated it. Went to an Equinox, hated it. One squat rack in 40,000 square feet. I'm like, no, I'm not training there. And then I went to Brick CrossFit. And so I hired this coach there. I'm like, hey, I'm a professional hockey player. I need a dedicated guy for me to train sport specific. I know you're a CrossFit coach, but I believe that you're smart enough that we can communicate. And I've also been in the league 10 years. I know what I need, and we can put together a great program to train. And so he's like, great. Do you mind if I do some just general functional fitness tests on you? And I'm like, sure. And so we tried some things. And I couldn't even, at that time, I could not overhead squat a barbell.
Wow.
Right? I played in the NHL for 12 years, and I couldn't overhead squat a barbell. And I was like, why can't I do that? As soon as I started squatting, the barbell just came forward and right to the floor. And right again, it came forward and right to the floor. But from 20 years of playing hockey, my shoulders were so rolled forward that I had no mobility to open up my chest and my shoulders and keep that barbell behind me and stay erect as I squatted. Which then, as we started diving into this kind of stuff, I'm like, wow, if I'm that far rolled forward in the shoulders, my chin is down, my head is exposed. If a player passes by me, I'm probably receiving contact closer to my head or my chin than I am being upright and receiving it right on the shoulder. Huh. So we started finding these little nuances where I'm like, wow, if we can become a more complete athlete with a lot of the methods from CrossFit, I'm not only going to be a better athlete on the ice, but I'm going to be safer. I'll have more longevity, protect myself more. And we just found more and more of these as we unpacked CrossFit and unpacked hockey and married them. We found more of these things that helped me as an athlete. And I wish I would have found CrossFit when I was in my teens. Yep. I would have implemented so much more of it in training for hockey. But I'm glad I found it now. And but yeah, it's really cool to see how building a complete athlete can help you versus just building a sport-specific athlete.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because, obviously we've been around the sport a long time, and we've heard that sentiment repeated time and time again. I wish I would have found it sooner, or through this kind of pursuit of knowledge that they unearthed this reality that GPP and building a more complete athlete can have some carryover. So I'm curious, why do you think, but there still is the disconnect, I feel like, from the mainstream pro sports and GPP and programs like CrossFit. Why do you think that is?
Might just be the infancy of CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
Might just be it's still truly you're an early adopter if you're doing the sport in the grand scheme of things, right? And I just don't know that it's become mainstream enough to really get the attention of athletes in general if they aren't super curious themselves. I was super curious. That's how I found Froning and CrossFit, because I was looking for more training methods, more modalities, more ways to become a better hockey player, but a better athlete. And if I'm not super curious myself, I'm probably going to stay in the same lane that the team trains me in. Every year, the team's going to give you a summer training book based on the general hockey movements we always do. And so some athletes just are going to do that, and they're never going to adopt CrossFit methodology or methodology or movement patterns or anything, because it's the safe play to train for hockey, right? And so it wasn't until I became, like, I was always super curious, but I might be an anomaly as far as a professional athlete, as looking outside of my traditional training grounds for ways to make me a better athlete, to become a better hockey player. Because we train sport specific, but also what if we can just become more athletic? Can we be a better athlete and then also incorporate those sport specific elements? So I hope that more athletes start giving it a look. And then also, like I said, I didn't switch to CrossFit when I was still playing hockey. I pulled elements of CrossFit into my hockey training, but I knew what my bread and butter was. I knew what was going to get me paid. And then I pulled other elements that rounded out my athleticism.
What are the elements that you think translate the best from CrossFit for an athlete who's a hockey player and wants to be a better hockey player?
Well, I mean, the sport is, you have to be able to squat in the sport, right? If you can't get below parallel and load heavy in the sport of CrossFit, you can't do CrossFit. So squatting, front squatting, I wish I would have done way more front squatting. In hockey, we back squat like crazy. I wish I would have done front squatting. I wish I would have done overhead squatting for sure. There's a lot of the bounding elements, but I wish I would have done more crossover symmetry, more handstand walking, just more general body awareness that a lot of the gymnastics part of CrossFit make you, or train in you, neurological adaptations that you make just to become a more balanced athlete. There's a tremendous amount of core in CrossFit. There's a lot of grip strength and grip endurance in CrossFit, which helps us shoot pucks, right? We always build wrists in hockey. And then the other things is the Olympic lifts. I never did Olympic lifting. It was never considered part of hockey training, but the ability to be explosive through your midsection, to explode through your legs and through your hips and explode weight, I think would be phenomenal for players to do today. But it's a completely overlooked. There's essentially, in football, I'm sure they'll do cleaning and stuff like that. But I don't know if any major sports do any sort of snatch work. And I wish I would have done that when I was younger, to learn to explode more through the hips with a load.
I don't know what training regimen I'm going to put Max on.
I was going to say, yeah, he's asking for
that away for later.
Hey, buddy, I'll come visit and we'll dial him in.
Oh man, that'd be amazing.
One element of your professional career that also is less publicized, obviously, is that you were a player representative for the Capitals during the NHL NHLPA collective bargaining agreement negotiations. And I think that's something that we have talked about off air and other elements too, just in, chatting on the aside, is the development of CrossFit on the professional side from a player advocacy standpoint. I'm curious, when you started to dig into the sport a little bit more, get to know some of the athletes, get more involved, what were some of the things that immediately stood out to you about the status quo as far as CrossFit as a sport is concerned in that arena?
Tommy, I was absolutely shocked. Let me just say that I was absolutely shocked at what I saw, what an athlete's life is like in CrossFit. And now that comes, like you said, I was on our executive board for our Players Association for 8 years. So I was part of our union. I was part of hiring and firing our executive directors, part of collective bargaining agreement. And this agreement, this contract between the Players Association and the league, right? That's like the athletes and CrossFit right now. And what I see in CrossFit is CrossFit yields all of the power, 100% of it. And the athletes have no say. They are at the mercy of everything CrossFit. And it's because there's no union, there's no pushback, there's no collective amongst the athletes. It's an individual sport, but they need to, I believe the athletes need to find a way to collectively come together to get some leverage and some power back and some negotiating power at the table with CrossFit. Currently, CrossFit athletes have no health insurance, they have no pension, they have no travel provisions, essentially. CrossFit athletes ship beds to the hotel they're going to stay at because they never know what it's going to be, what their bed is going to be like at the CrossFit Games, right? In the NHL, it's mandatory. We negotiated this. It's mandatory we fly first class. It's mandatory we stay at 5-star hotels. It's mandatory we get like $120 a day for per diem so we can eat good food. All of these things are mandatory. And that, granted, that comes with us being a century-old sport and more marketing dollars behind it. But I was shocked when I find out that CrossFit as a sport basically provides nothing support-wise, infrastructure-wise for the athletes, and the athletes are completely on their own to handle everything to participate in this sport. And so I'm a huge advocate for the athletes getting together. I've had many discussions with a lot of the athletes because I'm a fan of these guys. Like, I watch so many hours of CrossFit on YouTube, and like these athletes, I follow them all on social media. I'm a huge fan. I spend 99% of my time watching CrossFit, 1% of my time watching hockey. And so I want these athletes to succeed financially, all these components. I want them to be taken care of. They are, and it's because of this. I've seen thousands of NHL players in my life, and I see these CrossFit athletes, and they are phenomenal athletes, and they are committed, and it's across the board. And the sad thing is that if you win the CrossFit Games as the fittest man or woman in the world, you're going to get paid half of what the league minimum to play in the NHL is. So the league minimum in the NHL is $650,000. So some guys are going to make $650,000, and they're going to sit in the press box because they're spare players, they're extra players, for 60 out of the 80 games. Whereas Fraser or Toomey, who won the CrossFit Games as the fittest, most dominant, like pure, complete athlete in the world, are going to make half of that. That to me is so unfair, and I want so much for the athletes.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple of things that I want to dive into. First is that you look at the NHL, and it's 100+ years old, so they have a lot more runway.
Yeah.
And the second is resources and the money and the marketing dollars. And I know, and CrossFit is, when you look at just what they've done over the past 9-10 years, that certainly has grown.
Yeah.
It will, I think to compare the two might be a little bit unfair right now, but what are the things that you think can be done right off the bat with CrossFit athletes that can help improve things? Not necessarily in one fell swoop get them to where National Hockey League players are or NFL players, but can improve things right off the bat.
There's a lot. But the first thing, is that because I love the sport of CrossFit, right? And I want the athletes to win, and I want the sport to win, and they both need each other to elevate and everybody essentially make more money and have a bigger sport and bigger platform. You need each other. But where I see big holes right now, and as a fan of the sport, is that every year is different from the one before. I don't know how somebody's qualifying for the games. I don't know what the format is. Next year it's different. This year it's this, that. Next year it's this. So like, as a fan, how am I supposed to follow this? How am I supposed to follow this? To be like one of the big, like, all the pro sports are not only sports, they're marketing. You are in both businesses of being a professional sport. You're also in like the marketing space. And to be able to do that, there has to be some predictability. There has to be some regular schedule that the fan and marketers and people can pay attention to, and also that the athletes know. Like, the amount of athletes I've reached out to, I'm like, what's the qualifying format this year? And they're like, I have no idea. Like they haven't released it and we don't know what to, and I'm like, how do you guys participate in a sport where you don't even know when or where you're supposed to show up or how you get there? Like you're the best in the world at this. Can this please be organized in a way? And so that's where I see CrossFit as a, like, I believe CrossFit's a sport, but if you step back and take the personal side out of it, it's a once a year competition. It's what it is. It's a once a year competition. It's not a major sport. I want to see it become a major sport that's on TV. These athletes deserve it. The sport is so great. But there has to be some sort of season that we can follow. And as a fan, I want to see Tia versus Katrin 5 times a year versus 1 time a year, right? Like nobody wants to see Tiger Woods beat a couple club pros. You want to see Tiger versus Phil. That's why golf was great, right? You want to see the main athlete against the main athlete against the other main athlete, and you want to see it multiple times a year so you can have storylines, predictability, marketing can get behind it, and the sport can grow. But right now, there's just no predictability in the scheduling and the format of CrossFit, which makes it, my heart bleeds for the athletes because they have no idea what's going on and they have no leverage to bargain what's going on. And I want to see all of this just come together in a format where we can see our favorite athletes against the best in the world, measured side by side in the same events, in multiple events throughout the year, culminating with the CrossFit Games and the best in the world.
Mm-hmm. Right? And so kind of spinning off of that then, because I know there are attempts to start to try and at least materialize some things out of this, whether it's the PFAA, the Athlete Advisory Council for CrossFit. And I think that's still in the infancy stages of that forming. Has there been any sort of movement or conversations that you have had behind the scenes that could maybe shed some light on some developments and things that maybe could be major areas of growth in the next year or so?
I don't have any, I've never had any specific conversations about the PFAA or like really trying to help unionize athletes. But I'll say this, I spent 8 years on our NHLPA as our executive board rep for the Washington Capitals. I will lend my time, my expertise, any experience I have to any CrossFit athletes that want to have a discussion about this. I speak individually with athletes about this. Like, this is what I'm seeing. I come from a sport where all of this is organized, and this is how it benefits us as players. And this is what you guys will need to do, right? Like, you can't have the bottom 100 CrossFit athletes say, we're going to make a union. Nobody cares. You got to have the Tias, the Katrins, the Frasers, the Olsons, the top dogs in the sport say, hey, this isn't acceptable to us anymore. We need some bargaining power. We need medical coverage when we're on. You're designing these events that are really dangerous. If you really look at it, I could blow a shoulder and then have to pay for my own surgery to continue my own career to participate in the sport. How about some decent lodging? We stay in a really nice hotel, so I don't have to import a bed because I have no idea what kind of bed I'm sleeping on. How about like a really nice buffet? Any of this stuff, some compensation, some travel, a pension, any sort of pension. Like, I think CrossFit could really learn even a lot more from golf, because that's an individual sport, or tennis, which are individual sports, than it can from hockey. But I have areas, or I have expertise in unions, and would love to have conversations. Please, any CrossFit athletes that just want to pick my brain on any of this, I'm an open book for all of you, because I want so much for the athletes to succeed. Athletes have a shelf life. We have a small window, which are our prime earning years, mainly in our lifetime. And I want the athletes to get everything they can in those shelf life years and set themselves up for the pivot that they're going to make first retirement when they retire from CrossFit. They're going to pivot into something else. And I want their lives to be set up as mine is, because of the infrastructure that the sport and a union provides us.
In order to get there, though, CrossFit needs to bring in more resources and more money to pay for all this stuff. And right now, those dollars just aren't there. So you have the season that is getting organized. As far as, the past few years, we had the Wild West. Now we have more of a traditional structure that we were used to before 2018 and leading up to 2018. You were in a sport, the NHL, that was always viewed as, the distant fourth of the four major North American sports. It has grown and it has made a lot of inroads, but it's still in fourth place. How does CrossFit grow so that it gets the demand from spectators and the demand from advertisers who want to put money behind it, so it does make those things that you're talking about possible?
Well, here's one example. Go to CrossFit.com/shop. I go to that website right now. There's nothing on it. I can't buy a jersey of my favorite CrossFit athlete. Like, go to NHL.com/shop. You can buy merchandise of everything. Like, how about we license some of this then to the athletes, where, like, if I buy a Davidsdottir jersey, she gets a fraction of those sales and CrossFit gets a fraction of those sales. It'll encourage the athletes to be more like to brand themselves on social media and be more of a personality. So they grow, they're financially rewarded. The sport grows, it's financially rewarded, and everybody wins. But, like, go to CrossFit.com/shop. I can't buy a jersey or a sticker or a logo or a patch for my weight vest of any of my favorite athletes. There's nothing. Like, let's build this. Like, people are rabid fans of these people, right? If you go to an event and you see the way people react around these people, they're just rabid fans of these people. So how do we capitalize on that? That's one way. I think the marketing dollars, Sean, I think they're actually, like, there. I think it'll inflow. And if you have like golf has 4 majors a year, imagine if you had like Wadapalooza, like Dubai, Rogue, and Granite Games, or so you had 4 major events a year where I knew all the top 20 athletes were going to be there throwing down against each other. Like, money's going to pour into that. A network's going to want to pick this up, because also it's a storyline from every 6 weeks. We got a new competition, and maybe Rogue is very heavy barbell and Wadapalooza is going to have more swimming and stuff. So, like, different athletes are going to rise in different competitions. Like, anyway, and then also open it to the community. Look at what other sports are doing, how they're making money, generating money, but also currency attention. How are they generating attention? Because where there's attention, money will follow. And open it to the community. What are your ideas, guys? How can we grow this? We need each other to win this. And I have high hopes for Eric, for what he's going to do with the sport, because I think he listens. I think he's very, from what I've heard from people that know him, I haven't met him personally, but I know people that do. And I think he's very receptive to hearing what the community wants, because he wants the sport to grow and he wants the athletes to win and he wants the sport to win. So open it to the community as well, and listen to your athletes, listen to your sponsors, listen to the people who are going to pay the money. What do you guys want? How can we supercharge this so we all win?
And just so you know,
what's that?
I was going to say, just so you know, if you go to CrossFit.com/shop, the only thing you can buy is a gift code for the Open. So,
right?
Yeah.
Like, how do I get my Tommy Marquez jersey?
Yeah.
They might pay you to get that one.
I think we got a box of those in the back. We might be able to get
they're
those,
like they're right next to the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl titles.
But do you see how easy that is to set that up? Like, and have some sort of licensing agreement where then the athletes get they get some sort of like revenue sharing from that.
But then this is the other question I have, because you mentioned this too about individual sports versus team sports. And the union thing works for team sports, because if I want to go see Sidney Crosby play, I just can't go see him. I have to see the Pittsburgh Penguins. And so he benefits from, he has to have a team around him in order to succeed. With CrossFit and with golf and with tennis, the individual athletes are the selling points. Like, if Tiger Woods is at a tournament, yes, would you like to see him take on Phil Mickelson? Sure. But if Tiger Woods shows up, you're probably going to go. So that's where I see the impediment to a union with the athletes, being beneficial, because essentially you're creating an ecosystem where you have all the halves, like 5 or 6 people who are really the big draws. Yeah. They have to give up something in order to make that work for the bottom part of the athletes. So how do you work around that obstacle with this whole setup?
That's a really hard one. So that's the biggest obstacle, honestly, in this, Sean, is that your halves, your top dogs, your top 5 men and women, they're winning, right? They're winning the prize money. They're getting the sponsorship dollars. They're making a great life and great career in the sport of CrossFit. And why would they ever want to disrupt and rock that boat? But if they don't, the bottom, like I said, the bottom 100 athletes, they don't have enough leverage and enough power to collectively bargain on behalf of athletes. And so it's going to take your top dogs like uniting and saying, hey, we as a group, all of us, and it's going to have to be peers leaning on peers. And it's going to have to say, this is for the betterment of the sport and all the athletes that are to follow this. And we need to have a seat at the table and a voice at the table with CrossFit, with the sport. Otherwise, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. The sport of CrossFit is only going to continue to take. This is a business, right? This is not, as much as I learned this, hockey was my heart until I learned the business side of what it was. In my life, in my hockey career, I lost over $2 million to NHL lockouts. That means I had, my contract was signed. The NHL locked us out for an entire season. The owner said, you're not playing this year. That cost me that cost me about, I think it was about $1.6 million that year, and another half year that cost me another $600,000 or something. I've lost millions of dollars because the owners leveraged us or leaned on us with power. And so we had to fight back. Our union had to fight back. Then we also had a 24% salary rollback on top of that, and another 7% after that. So like, it's only going to get worse for these athletes unless they start arm wrestling back. But you need your top guys to do it, your top guys and girls to do it. But it's a really hard discussion, but you have to have an educated voice in that space, or one of your top athletes say, this isn't about us, guys. I know we're winning. This is not about us. This is about people that make a tenth of the money that we do, or a fraction of the money. And it's about setting this up so this sport can actually survive. Because bottom line, if CrossFit wants to be a big sport, you have to have your legacy athletes. You have to have your Tias and your Frasers and your Davis daughters, because that makes the sport cool. But if the athletes aren't protected and athletes are only around for 2 years, and it's a car wash of washing new ones in, washing the other ones out because they physically can't hold up, or their infrastructure doesn't support them to train, anything like this, the sport's not going to grow.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you could correct me if you don't share the same view as this, but I feel like the infrastructure of other sports making the lifestyle outside of the sport more lucrative for its athletes adds to the coolness factor from the next generations and in the public persona. I guess I was kind of like tying, earlier when I mentioned about the disconnect between other pro sports and utilizing CrossFit. Well, a part of it, I think too, is like the financial element. If I look at CrossFit's pro athletes and they make less than the guy at the end of the bench in my sport, I'm not going to see them as an equal, as bad as that may sound, versus, and this is kind of plays in a little bit into the superficial element of things, but you look at other sports and you see there's at least a little bit of glitz and glam behind the pro athlete lifestyle or the success that it affords you. And then suddenly the perception of that starts to change in the kind of social zeitgeist for kids and prospective athletes, and the talent pool that's going to keep your sport refreshed over time. And maybe that's the kind of the difference between CrossFit, I think, and some of the other pro sports at this time.
Yeah, I don't know I just don't know if that's enough to drive people to want to. Let's say CrossFit athletes made $5 million a year. Mm-hmm. I don't know that that's going to make young kids want to be CrossFit athletes more. And I can only speak from personal experience on that. Is that I never ever played hockey for the money. It was never about the money. It was like, I love this sport. I played this from the time I was 2 years old. I want to do this because I love it. But it does enhance the cool factor. Like, oh, what if Fraser rolls up to the games in a Ferrari? Like, oh, this is badass, right? Like, I don't know. It does enhance the cool factor, but I don't know if that's going to drive the next generations to do it. But I'm sure it will. It can only benefit it, right? If somebody's going to dedicate from the age of 15 till 30 pursuing a sport that's going to make them 40 grand a year, they're going to be like, well, maybe I'll just go to college, not wreck my body, and be an accountant or a lawyer and make 100 grand a year. And then I could do that until I'm 60, whereas in CrossFit, I'm out at 30.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was thinking more of like on the media side of things too. Like okay. I call it like the, almost like the Space Jam effect. Like you wouldn't see a CrossFit athlete in a Space Jam like type movie or in these commercials with all these collections of other pro athletes. Cause there's an order of magnitude difference in the lifestyle that's afforded to them, that's attractive to marketers and commercial type output and media stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just, and I think it's not any reflection, Tommy, on the individual. It's
totally.
It's certainly not a reflection on the individual. I believe that's a reflection on the quote unquote, and I hate this term, but illegitimacy quote of the sport. Like it's not a tennis, so you're not going to see Federer with a Rolex, right? Tennis is a polished sport, and so Rolex is a great brand. The golfers will have their watch on. It's like, so it's not a reflection of the individual. It's just a reflection of the infancy of the sport of CrossFit. And that's why I want to see all of it grow, all of it be adopted, have it be on a major network, because I'm a fan of this sport and these athletes are mind-blowing. Do people understand how mind-blowing and capable these athletes are? Please look at that. And then once you see this, you'll go, oh my God, this needs to be blown up. This sport is fascinating and incredible, and it's going to drive humanity forward. What is the human body capable of? Mm-hmm. Right? Like this sport can drive that conversation in humanity. So that's why I want it. But the marketing dollars just aren't there because the sport hasn't legitimized itself as one of the top dogs yet.
Well, we have seen the sport get on network TV. I mean, last year, 2020, the games were on CBS. And hopefully that happens again this year. I know they were always interested in, and it seems to me that the big key is getting a sustainable season with events that offer enough prize money to where the person who finishes 20th can still do okay, because that's what you see in the PGA Tour. You can you can make the cut and finish 36, and you have enough to make a living. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, I don't think that happens overnight. But there've got to be steps that we can take, quick in the near future to get on that path.
Yeah.
I know that's not a question. That's more of a statement.
So. No, yeah, you're totally right, Sean. Can we get some sort of like the PGA players, they have their tour card, right? And having your tour card affords you X, Y, and Z of these benefits, of the benefits of like maybe travel accommodations, per diem, pension, body work, whatever it is. Having your tour card affords you a baseline of perks. Can we develop some sort of that system, even if it's minimal, but it's for the top 15 or 20 athletes, men and women, like something to support these athletes. Like, please, let's start somewhere and support these athletes. And over time, as the competitions get bigger, as the sport grows, as more money comes in, this will grow. But we need to start somewhere. And maybe it's something like that, some sort of tour card where to come to these 4 events, you will at least be paid the economy ticket, like at least have your flights booked. Like we'd want to get that to first class, sure, but at least let's get your travel compensated first.
So in order to create a pool of money that the athletes can draw from, in order to have this, it either A, has to come from the events, or B, has to come from the athletes themselves. So what do you think is more likely, that the events say, okay, we'll pay for all this, or the athletes get together and say, like a union would, we're going to take a certain percentage of our winnings and put it into a pool for everybody? But again, that gets back to some people are giving up a lot more than others.
Yeah, but it's the same percentage, right? So I did that in the NHL. Like a percentage of my salary went to the union. Now, if I made $1 million, if I made $6.5 million, the percentage was the same. The amount was different, but the percentage was the same. So nobody could complain along that. Regardless of what you make, X percent, 1% of your salary is going to go in there. That would at least help. Can you get CrossFit to match that? At least that. Now we've at least doubled that, right? Can we get any sort of marketers or sponsors or something to pitch into that? Can we do appearances or something where that money will go towards that? What can we do? That's why I said we got to open up the conversation to everybody and have as many smart people dump ideas in here and find a way that's efficient, that actually executes what it's done and doesn't tax the athletes or the sport in a way where it costs all of this output of manpower and time. There's enough collective intelligent brains out there that can figure this out. But certainly, yeah, like I paid a percentage of my dues every year, or a percentage of my salary to NHL PA dues. And I was absolutely fine with that because I had health insurance provided. I had pension representatives. They represented I had many other perks that come with being part of a union that I was more than happy. In fact, now if I could, I would pay those dues to still be part of that union. But because I'm not an active player, I can't be part of that union.
And one of the things that kind of stood out in just kind of having this conversation is I feel like there are some difficult decisions ahead. There's some conversations that need to be had that some people don't want to have, some decisions that maybe are made for the short-term sacrifice for the greater good. I'm curious if you saw similar kind of compromises made in the NHL, and if you see any potential ones up ahead in the sport of fitness that might need to be made as well.
Which ones do you see, Tommy? Is there any on the top of your brain that you see the first issues to face?
I think there's, and I think this has slowly been unraveling for the larger part of a decade, but there was this mystique around the CrossFit Games in terms of the unknown and unknowable, where the cessation of information and as a result, power over those procedures just didn't exist. And I feel like CrossFit on the organizational side is going to have to be okay with giving more people a peek behind the curtain for the sake of information and understanding on a broader sense for athletes and other people involved in these negotiations to be able to kind of see each other on common ground. Because and maybe this comes from the early days of CrossFit being so defensive, and rightfully so at the time, over their methodology and their quote unquote secret sauce. Yeah. That I think they were unwilling to, give people insight into what maybe an open workout might be, or what the games workouts might be. And to me, it's that fear of giving up something that you've held kind of near and dear for so long. And I don't know if that's a little too nebulous for you, but to me, I just feel like you're going to have to play ball from CrossFit side with more people than you were used to and expand that inner circle.
I agree with you there. I love the coolness factor of being the sport of the unknown and unknowable. But it's also can be a curse. The blessing can also be the curse if it goes too far. Like that can't apply to the schedule. That can't apply to the season. That can't apply to the qualifying format, right? Like give the athletes a break here and the fans. Like let's know what this schedule and season is, so that then we can actually have a true test of we have the best people here at the right time. Everybody's known the format and we've arrived at this date, like the Stanley Cup playoffs, Sean. We play 82 games to earn the right to be there. And we then find out who the best is. They don't say, oh, no, sorry. Oh, it's 46 games. Stop. We're going to do this now. It's like, what the hell's going on?
They did this year and last year, actually. Yeah. Things.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, you're 100% right. And just and now there's more like a discussion thing. I think you're 100% right about the season. And I think that's where they're going. They have somewhat of an organized structure in the season that allows them to either expand or contract based on participation. And hopefully the format that we have now sticks. Yeah. This is the third different format we've had in 3 years. Then I think what you're getting is now what I think is fantastic is an off season where you're going to have some of those bigger events that you were talking about, Brooks, where athletes can go and compete and it's just for money. There's no, this is trying to find the fittest. It's like, let's just have these, big competitions where we can have, big prize packages. But then the concern I have is that you have to know when it's big enough, because I think you can oversaturate things and kill interest. And I think that's kind of what we saw the last 2 years with all these sanctioned events and people won every week. And I think people lost interest at that point. And what would you say to that?
Well, my first question is, why would your biggest, most marketed and attractive events be in the off season?
Let's not call it an off season. Let's call it a separate season.
It's like the Fedex Cup, if you will.
Yeah.
The Fedex Cup is not one of the, the cup, the race for the Fedex Cup in golf is the most lucrative part of the season. The Fedex Cup champion makes the most money, but it's not one of the four majors. It's not one of the primary pursuits in terms of accolades, if you will, but it exists in unison with the season. It's recognized by, I believe, by the PGA. So if this off season, we could probably find a better term for it, but they're CrossFit sanctioned events, the CrossFit recognized events. So that you have the attention and the media and the coverage of the community from it being like a CrossFit competition, which is also an aside I could definitely go into about some of the history of that. But it provides a more lucrative based focus versus just the title of fittest on earth. Because the Fedex Cup champion isn't considered necessarily the best golfer on the planet, yeah. But the guy who walks away with more majors or wins one of the 4 majors is probably carries that moniker a little bit more so.
Yeah, it makes sense what you say now, how you phrase that. So now I see and I agree with you, Sean, that in the offseason you could have something that has a big purse that a lot of money goes towards. But like, I want to have or I shouldn't say because the sport isn't about me. As a fan, I would love to see the marquee events be part of the structured season, right? So I don't want to get carried away that we're going to have like just this kind of like season, and then the really cool stuff's going to be in the off season, because I don't think that makes the sport better long term. But there's definitely a discussion. Smarter people than me are going to have it, and people in the inner circle of that sport are going to have it, of like, okay, what can we do to have marquee events during the season, to have the best on best? We need best on best during the season. NHL teams don't play minor league teams during the season. Nobody wants to see that crap, right? Yeah. We want to see best on best. We want rivalries. Yep. That makes like NBC, Saturday night, whatever, Wednesday night rivalry games. We want to see those. I want to see, as a fan of the sport, I want to see the best on best multiple times leading up to the culmination of the CrossFit Games, and then leave the marketing minds to decide how are we going to compensate, like, hey, let's put a lot of money up for some sort of event in the off season if athletes want to participate in that as well.
Yeah, this isn't as much a question as is like a kind of musing. I think one of the threads that needs to be kind of figured out in the future is the rate and frequency of competition. Because I think this is where kind of CrossFit lands as a unicorn, in my opinion, is that it has the individual structurings of something like a PGA or an ATP tour. However, in both of those instances, or even like a NASCAR, all of those sports can be done at a high volume, at a high frequency, at a weekend by weekend kind of rate, to where you can have enough of that constant titration of product out to the community to kind of build that. Whereas I think we're still figuring it out, how many times ideally a top athlete can and more importantly, wants to compete during a season, with the understanding that it's going to be what's driving them. And we see some athletes compete 5-6 times at a mini peak. We see athletes at 3, some at 4. And so that might be another area of growth in terms of kind of ironing that out.
And it's gonna have to, I think it's ultimately going to have to be a disruption of the mindset of the athlete. Because currently the CrossFit athlete says, I need to peak for the CrossFit Games. That's really the only thing that matters, is I need to peak at the CrossFit Games. If I place well there, I'll get sponsors and I'll get prize money and whatever. That's great. I would love to skip the entire regular season and just say, I'm going to play the playoffs. Like, that's if you want to be one of the major sports, you have to play. And like, we play every second night, and we play a physical game where we're exerting physical energy ourselves, and then other grown men could smash into us, right? Like, football is an aggressive game. They play every week. So the CrossFit athlete says, oh, I can only compete. Like, the mindset that I've seen is like, oh, I don't like competing. I like training and getting to the point where then I'm peaking for X competition. I selfishly would love to see one heavyweight, like, major competition every 6 weeks. Like, imagine if you had the Open, then you had like a month, and then you had like the first competition, then another 6 weeks, another competition, another 6 weeks competition, 6 weeks competition, then maybe a month and a half again, and then you had the Open, or then you had the CrossFit Games for like the title. Like, the athletes too, if the athletes want to make more money, want to get a pension, want to get medical benefits, want to get travel benefits, if they want this stuff, they're going to have to open up to the idea that you are going to have to compete more than once a year. Or, like, it seems like it's a nuisance for the athletes to go to a sanctional or a regional. They're like, oh, I got to go travel here. I'm like, well, wait, I will travel anywhere on this planet to play a hockey game. It's because I love competing.
Yeah.
Like, we got to adopt this mindset. Like, hey, where's a throwdown? I'll go because I want to prove that I'm the best against the best. Line up the next guy. I'll go there. Right. And it just doesn't seem to be this kind of a mindset. I believe the athletes are fierce warriors like that, but the sport, the mindset of the sport isn't lined up like that. They think long-term, let me ramp up to the CrossFit Games. And you can do that and you can continue to have the sport where it is, or more is going to be called up upon you to deliver and compete more in order to raise awareness, marketing dollars, money, financial compensation, everything within the sport.
I think that one thing that people, when we have this conversation, the thing they get trapped into is the perception that CrossFit wants to be like those other 4 sports. And the conversations I've had with people, they've told me is like, no, we want to be our own thing. We don't want to be like those. And I think what makes CrossFit unique is they have this egalitarian competition where anybody can enter and they're all about crowning the fittest. And that is unique to anything else. It's not like, somebody can walk into a rink in Ontario and all of a sudden be on the Maple Leafs for that season. Like, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. So I love the fact that they have that. And I think that marketing that is something that they need to do better. And I think we're going to see that. Not really sure where I was going with this, but just to say that there is that perception that CrossFit needs to be like the NFL. And they would say, no, we don't. And what do you think about that?
I think you're right there, Sean. So CrossFit doesn't need to be like anybody else. It's its own thing. Be unique, be what you are. But I will say that you can take elements and successful things from other sports. So what is so damn cool about CrossFit is that I can enter the CrossFit Open. Mm-hmm. I can enter it. I do CrossFit in my garage right here. I can enter the CrossFit Open and see where I stack against everybody in the world, right? That is so damn cool to me. I'm like, I finished 399th this year in the Masters division. And I'm like, that is so damn cool that I have this data and this like comparison against the community around the world. Like, and I get to enter that for $20. Now I'll go on and I'll do quarters, or I guess it's semis, whatever for Masters. We don't have quarters and semis, but I'm going to do that in May. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be so fun for me because, oh my God, I finished in the top 10%. I get to move on to the next stage and participate. I feel like I'm a CrossFit athlete, even though I'm not paid to be a CrossFit athlete. That's so damn cool. Don't lose that, CrossFit. But then from that stage on, from semis on, whatever, like, how do we build this where once the general community falls off, no other sport has this. No other sport gets to participate against Tom Brady or LeBron James in some sort of like, I get to participate against, Cole Sager. I get to participate against Cole Sager, who lives 30 minutes down the road from me. He's a good buddy of mine. And I get to be in the same competition as him, at least for 1, maybe 2 stages. And then he's blowing the doors off me. But how cool is that? Yeah. So that's the coolness factor. Don't lose that. But then how can we build the rest of the schedule out and the format from there?
And to be fair, you did pretty darn good in the Open this year. I'm looking up your scores right now. Finishing sub 13 and 21.2, and then sub 14, finishing the 21.3.
That is
workout.
Impressive.
Not bad, man. Not bad.
You know what's unique? Actually, I wasn't even training much because I had my whole gym pulled apart at that time, and I was putting the flooring down. So I didn't train all week for 21.1. Just hit the workout on Monday morning. Didn't train for 21.2. Just hit that workout as well. But so I think I can do better. I really believe I can do better, and I'm going to ramp up for the May competition. But when the wall walks came out, my buddy Matt Hewitt sent me a message. He's like, I've never done a wall walk. And I'm like, excuse me? And then a couple other athletes, I was talking to a couple other athletes, and they're like, I've never done a wall walk. And I was like, I've literally done thousands of wall walks. And they're like, why have you done them? And I was like, because I've practiced in so many practice rinks that sometimes don't have a gym. And I would do 30 wall walks for time. Like I would just stuff like this in hockey. And I'm like, oh my God, I might have an advantage here because I've done so many wall walks in my life. So it's just fun to be a part of, man. It's fun to come from another sport. Again, guys, I'm not in this sport. I'm not competing to be the best in the world. I retired from the sport I loved and like threw my soul into. And this is now what I get to do for fun. Or this is fun for me. So I want for the athletes, I want for the sport, because I'm a fan of this whole space. I'm a fan of it, and it's part of my daily life. I have my whole garage. Sean, I just showed you before we came on air here.
Nice.
Showed you my entire garage is turned into a CrossFit gym. I invite all the athletes here to come train here. It's just, I'm such a fan of it, and I just want everybody to win it.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I got. Speaking of fun, and I got a couple fun questions for you, and I'm kind of curious. Across, and one of the things I love about hockey is the jerseys. I think hockey jerseys are the best in pro sports. I love even going back to some of the old jerseys, the throwbacks. I'm curious, in your opinion, what is the best hockey jersey on the planet, past and present?
Oh, Tommy, I don't even know how we get there. I mean, the heart in me wants to say the red Washington Capitals because it's what I wore for 10 years. And that was just like, that was so cool. If you ask like traditional hockey people, they will say the old school Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, that's a tough one to beat.
Yeah,
that's kind of like their logo is just like cool and the colors are cool and like, yeah, I don't know, the best hockey. When the Avalanche came out, when Quebec moved from Quebec to Colorado, and that Avalanche logo came out, everybody switched to become an Avalanche fan. Yeah. That was really cool. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have an answer of what the best is. I loved Sean. I showed you what I did here in my house. I put down my number.
He doesn't have a jersey up in his garage.
Really?
Yeah, you got to get. I mean, come on.
It's funny.
He has to have a jersey.
Seriously. That's actually quite surprising.
Yeah.
I love like very simple blue and white like combinations together. So some of the old like the Maple Leafs jerseys I really like. I love the old Hartford Whalers jersey. That's like one of my the tail up it's phenomenal. And this is coming from a guy I've grown up in California my entire life, so I'm a Sharks fan. So. But yeah, I was just kind of curious because I've had a couple debates with some friends over some classic hockey jerseys and stuff like that. And the follow-up question I have is this, and this is something that maybe taps into your Canadian roots. In your opinion, who is the best player at chirping that you ever played with?
I get asked that question all the time. Hey, we actually had discussions because Sean, you mentioned earlier on the podcast, we're way behind the other three major sports in the U.S. Right? It goes NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, us. Or it's actually Major League Baseball second because they have more games, so they generate more money. But we're way down behind. So we were having these creative brainstorm sessions. How do we grow our sport? And we talked about, should we put our sport on HBO so that you can have everything be Mike?
That would be awesome.
And Tommy, how much you guys would love to watch that. What's Doughty like? Imagine if you had a mic on Doughty, like an unfiltered mic. Like Sean, you would love it. I would
watch every game just for that. It's so good.
We talked about this. Should we put hockey on HBO? But then we talked about like, that's gonna wreck individual lives. Like guys are gonna be blacklisted just because of the trash that goes on the ice. I get asked a lot, who's the best trash talker? I mean, I've seen a million clips of Doughty. I didn't play against him so much because I was in the West or in the East. He was in the West, but like he's always involved. Brad Marchand is always involved. It's I don't know. It's usually your bottom two lines.
Yep.
Usually your bottom two lines chirp the other bottom two lines. Like guys can chirp your top dog, and the guys like somebody chirps Crosby. It's like, great, I make 10 mil. What you got? You know, like what you got? Okay. Oh, whatever. You know. So, but it's funny. I don't know. It's funny the best chirp all time or the best comeback is like when somebody's chirping, it's just like, hey, I'm in the same league you are, man. Like, I can't be that bad, right? If you're that good and I'm in the same league you are, I can't be that bad.
That's a good one.
But I don't know, Tommy, to answer your question, I don't know who was. There's so many. It's less of a part of the game now. It used to be a massive part of the game because there was sometimes just big dummies that would sit on the bench and play 4 minutes a night. Now everybody plays 12, 13 minutes a night, 11, 12 minutes a night. So that kind of role player like that is not as prevalent anymore.
For sure.
What was this will be my last question about hockey, and then we can let you go here. But what was your welcome to the NHL moment?
Oh, I had many of them. Truthfully, I remember my very first game, right? Quite often the pursuit of something is easier than the realization of something. So pursuing the NHL, it's like, yeah, I'm hungry. I want the NHL. Let's go. Like, I'm chasing this. I'm chasing this. Hey, Brooks, we're going to call you up. You're going to play your first NHL game tomorrow. Deer in the headlights. Like, whoa, right? Like, the chase of something is a lot easier than the realization of it. So the puck drops. So in my first NHL game, the trainer comes to me after warmups. He goes, I just want to tell you, thank you. And I'm like, for what? And he goes, you skated around for 16 minutes with a smile on in warmups, and I haven't seen that in a long time. And I was like, he's like, you're so excited to be here. That was just awesome to see. And I was like, that's cool. And then anyway, the very first shift in the NHL, I see Jeff Friesen skate down and wire a shot that just misses our net. And I see this from the bench. I'm not on the ice yet. I see this from the bench. I'm like, oh my God, this is fast. I've never seen a puck shot like that. This is the fastest I've ever seen people move. Like, this is legit. And then played my first game and then like scoring your first goal. But there were some moments when like I would beat Joe Thornton on a face-off.
Ooh.
Right? Like, and I'm like, oh, I used to idolize these guys, and now I'm here. And then I'd take a puck from Peter Forsberg, and I'm like, you're not that good. I'm like, damn, you're good. You're so good, and I'm such a fan of you, but you're a human. And it took for the first like 10 games, it took me some time to stop looking at these guys. And once I had little bits of success against them, I'm like, you're human, I'm human. I deserve to be here. I can compete against you. I know you're a legend. I know you're better than me, and you'll probably win more than I'm going to win right now, but I deserve to be here competing against you, and I will improve. And so there's just many moments like that, just little face-offs, little puck battles against somebody. I remember playing against Scott Stevens. My first game in the NHL was Scott Stevens. And I remember seeing his eyes, and like, I'm like, this guy is a born killer. Like, this is what NHL competition is. This is what big boys do. Like, just moments like that where I'm like, wow. Patrick Elias in my first game, I was like, I've never seen somebody stick handle like that. When I played against Mario, I'm like, oh my God, he's smarter. He's a million times smarter than the rest of us. So like I said, it's the biggest like reward for me in my career, just to have played with and against the best in the world. To be able to be there and to be there for 15 years was just an absolute, that means more to me than any sort of money or fame or anything that ever came from the sport. That was always my pursuit.
Well, Brooks, thanks so much for taking the time. Really enjoyed the conversation. And I think we all can agree that we all want the sport of CrossFit to succeed and grow, because it means more enjoyment for us and more for me and Tommy to do, hopefully. So, our livelihoods are kind of tied to it, but really appreciate your perspective, and good luck in the age group online qualifier.
Thank you. Also, I love what you guys do. And I've been a fan of you guys because when I found CrossFit, you guys are the guys that deliver the media for CrossFit. So I hope that this discussion today drives more discussion in the community. That's my hope from it, is that the community starts discussing this, athletes discuss it, the decision makers at CrossFit start looking at things. And like, because I have high hopes for the sport, it's what I built my whole garage gym into, like the ultimate CrossFit training place, because it's going to be part of my life the rest of my life. So also consider yourselves invited out to the lake.
That'd be awesome. We'll do it.
Oh yeah.
Consider yourselves invited. I always have, this place is my heart, and I always want to open it to people to always feel welcome. So
we're talking about maybe making a roadie up to Madison. So
okay, swing through.
Maybe we'll have to do that. But again, thank you so much for taking the time. And I think the great thing about these conversations is that everybody wants the same thing. Some people might have different ideas of how to get there, but we all want this to be better. So I think that's what's pretty cool about it.
Yeah, and we need all those ideas. We need different opinions, right? We need to get every single idea and every perspective dumped into a pool and then figure out what's the best there. So it's good to have disagreements. People are going to disagree with what I said today. That's fine. Find another solution. And I don't have all the answers, but like I have some experience coming from a century-old sport that's had a union for now 54 years, right? So just as many conversations we can have, as if the community can jump in on it, the people, the decision makers, the marketers, the sponsors, speak up. What do you want? Because like you said, Sean, we're all fans of the sport and the athletes, and we want it to elevate. So if we can anyway be a part of that, then we've served the sport and tried to give back to it for all that it has given us, right?
Yep, absolutely. Well, Brooks, thanks so much, man. And we look forward to seeing you in person, hopefully very soon.
Yeah, you guys are wonderful. Come to the lake house. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.